Some officers serve with honor. Some serve with patience. But then there are the ones who wear the badge like it's a crown. Men who confuse authority with power. On that stretch of road, it wasn't about safety. It wasn't about law. It was about an ego in uniform looking for someone to crush. And when Jason Statham rolled up on his motorcycle, the officer saw not a man, but a target. The push came fast, a shove to the chest, a finger in the face. "Hollywood cowards," he sneered. "Think you're tough when the cameras roll." The bystanders thought it was routine, a cop flexing, a rider humiliated. But what they didn't know was that Jason Statham didn't learn toughness from movie sets. He learned it from bare-knuckle fights, from training grounds where pain was the teacher, from years of surviving places where arrogance gets men killed. The officer thought he was making a point. What he was really making was a mistake. The day had started clean, the kind of blue sky that makes asphalt shine like a blade. The roadblock rose out of nowhere, a string of cones, two cruisers set nose to nose, and an officer with cheekbones sharp enough to cut paper pacing the center line like it belonged to him. Jason throttled down as the line of cars ground to a stop. A minivan with a soccer decal, a delivery van that smelled like warm bread, a couple in a convertible arguing about podcasts. Engines murmured. People craned necks. Phones hovered like vultures. Jason put a boot down, killed the engine, and let the silence drop over him. He wore a plain leather jacket, no logos, no flash. The bike ticked as it cooled, metal talking to metal in tiny clicks. He took in the scene the way he always did, 3 breaths, slow scan. One officer directing traffic with bored wrists, another at the cruisers, scowling into a clipboard, and the one in the middle, setting the tone like a drum major who'd never learned to love music. Middle officer was the kind who liked to be seen. Gloves too tight, sunglasses too mirrored. He had the posture of a man who imagined himself in a movie poster and the patience of a lit fuse. He waved 2 cars through with the grace of swatting flies, then fixed on the motorcycle like it had insulted his mother. "Kill the engine," he shouted. "It's off." Jason's voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. "Helmet off," the officer barked, already marching. Jason lifted it, calm and slow. Faces surfaced in the windscreen reflections, people curious, people hungry for a scene. The minivan kids pressed their noses to the glass. The guy in the convertible held up his phone and pretended he wasn't filming. The officer stopped close enough that his badge reflected in Jason's eyes. He smelled like department coffee and impatience. "License." Jason handed it over. The officer didn't look at the name, not really. He drew out the moment instead, like a magician palming a coin. "Were you headed in such a rush?" "No rush," Jason said, "just the road." "Actor, huh?" The officer flicked the card with a fingernail that had seen too many scuffed dashboards. "Figures." "What figures?" "That you'd think this is optional." A smile that wasn't a smile. Random safety stop. Helmets, registration, sobriety. He leaned in, searching for something to find. "That jacket looks heavy. Mind stepping off the bike?" Jason swung a leg over and stood. The officer stepped closer, uninvited. People leaned forward like grass under a storm wind. "Spread your arms." "I don't consent to a search," Jason said, calm as a locked door, "unless you've got probable cause." That should have been the end of it. It could have been. A sigh, a ticket, a wave through, and a story the officer tells later with less venom. But some men can't hear no without tasting blood. The officer's jaw flexed. His finger rose. He poked Jason in the chest like punctuation. "Probable cause is you being a problem." The second poke became a shove. Not catastrophic, not even clever, just the kind of push a kid gives a vending machine when it won't drop the candy. Jason didn't move. He simply felt the point of contact, recognized it, and made a note he'd never forget. A few heads turned. The traffic officer stopped pretending to care about cones. The clipboard officer looked up, sniffing drama like gasoline. "You got something to say, cowboy," the officer said, "or only when there's a script?" Jason blinked once, slow. "How many people you try that with today?" "Just the ones who need reminding." He flashed the badge the way some people flash a watch. "Here's the reminder." He pushed again, harder. Jason's boots held. He glanced past the officer's shoulder at the 2-lane ribbon stretching into the trees, and for the smallest moment he looked like a man thinking about water, how it goes around things, how it wears stone down without raising its voice. "I'm not your audience," Jason said. "Do your check or let me ride." The officer's grin slid an inch. "Step over to the shoulder. We're doing this my way." Jason's eyes went to the shoulder. A strip of grit, a ditch, a patch of weeds bending under wind from passing cars. "No," he said, not loud, firm enough to change the air. Everything slowed then. People always say that about the seconds before a bad decision, but here it felt like the road itself was listening. The officer's nostrils flared. His hand came up in a fist he hadn't trained to use. Bystanders, the van dad, the convertible guy, shifted their weight like guilt. "Let me spell this out," the officer hissed. "You're going to the shoulder or you're going in cuffs." Jason tilted his head. For a heartbeat he said nothing, and the silence became heavy enough to lift. "You're going to take a breath," he said. "Then you're going to step back, and we're both going to act like men who know better." The officer didn't breathe. He snatched for Jason's jacket. That's when the change happened, so small you could miss it on a phone screen. Jason's hand intercepted the grab, not a block, not flashy, just a turn of the wrist that unhooked the officer's fingers and placed them back where they'd started. No pain, no threat, just an impossible fact. The grab did not happen. The officer stared at his own hand like it had betrayed him. Gasps feathered across the line of cars. The traffic cop shifted from boredom to unsure. Clipboard looked to the radio and decided not to touch it yet. The officer felt the eyes, and rage poured into the space where shame should have gone. "Resisting," he announced to the world. He reached again, this time for Jason's throat. Jason's left hand came up, palm open, and halted the arm midair. That was it. The force in the touch wasn't force, it was geometry. A lever, a hinge, a denied direction. The officer's elbow locked without pain, and he realized for the first time that the man he'd chosen was not brittle. The man was built like consequences. "Don't do that," Jason told him. "Don't," the officer barked, a laugh shaped like a cough. "Who do you think?" "Someone who doesn't want to embarrass you," Jason said. "You're doing that on your own." Clipboards and cones can only hold so much tension before it breaks. The officer ripped his hand free, took a step back, and gestured wildly. "Hands where I can see them. On your knees." Jason didn't move. He could have, and part of him, some old part that slept lightly, prepared for 3 outcomes and 5 exits. But there were eyes here. Kids in vans and women with car seats and a couple whose argument had died in their throats. He wasn't going to teach them the wrong lesson. "I'm not kneeling in the road for your pride," he said. "You have a job, do it right." "You think you get to tell me what?" The officer stopped, the words snagging on something behind Jason's stare. He wasn't used to mirrors that looked back. He wasn't used to a voice that didn't climb to meet his. He wasn't used to a man who refused the role of suspect and wouldn't audition for victim. "You got a supervisor here?" Jason asked. Clipboard cleared his throat from the cruisers. "Lieutenants en route." "Good," Jason said, and then, as if remembering his own script, "I'll wait." That should have cooled it. It almost did. But the officer felt the crowd slipping from his fingers like wet rope. He needed the moment back. He needed to carve his initials in it. He barked at the traffic cop to close the lane, waved a minivan forward, shouted orders in a way that turned words into noise. Then he walked a wide arc back to Jason as if circling prey. "You know what I hate," he said, too casual. "People who think rules are for other people, people who swagger like they're special." "You're describing yourself," Jason said. The officer's mouth opened, then snapped shut. He stepped in until their chests almost touched. Up close, his pupils were a little too wide. "Last chance, shoulder, now." Jason looked over the crowd once more. The boy in the minivan had stopped breathing. The convertible phone was shaking. The delivery driver mouthed a prayer into bread-smelling air. Jason sighed, the kind of sigh that belongs to men who have tried to live quietly and keep finding out the world has other plans. "I offered you the easy way," he said. "This is the last time I'll do it." The officer shoved him, not a warning this time, a two-handed push meant to topple. Jason stepped back 1 inch, not because he had to, but because he wanted the officer to feel like he'd moved a mountain. He settled his feet, breathed once, and let the weight of being a better man stack on his shoulders. Then, very gently, he took the officer's wrists, lifted them away from his chest, and set them down in the space between them as if returning cutlery. "Listen," he said, and his voice dropped into that quiet that cuts. "This is going to end with you angry and me riding away. You get to choose how many people watch you be the reason." It wasn't a threat. It was a weather report. The officer's face flickered. A vein he pretended not to have jumped near his temple. He reached for his radio, found it, missed the button, found it again. "Dispatch, this is Unit 19 at checkpoint." The squawk of reply was drowned by the low, smooth growl of another engine. A black SUV eased onto the shoulder and stopped behind the cruisers. Doors opened. A woman in a lieutenant's bars stepped out, hat settled, eyes already measuring the temperature. "What's the issue?" she asked, walking like someone who owns her feet. The officer straightened, wiping his face with his voice. "Non-compliant motorcyclist, refusing commands, aggressive." The lieutenant's gaze went from Jason's relaxed hands to the officer's flushed cheeks to the circle of spectators vibrating with the charge of a story forming. She looked back to Jason, and something in his stillness told her he wasn't the one who needed managing. "Sir," she said to Jason, "are you armed?" "No." "Are you refusing lawful orders?" "I'm refusing unlawful ones," Jason said. "I'm happy to show registration license. I did. I'm not stepping into a ditch to be shoved." The lieutenant's mouth didn't move, but her eyes softened a fraction. She turned to the crowd. "Did anyone record the interaction?" 20 phones rose like flowers chasing sun. "Great," she said. She faced the officer. "Take a breath, step back." It came out gentle and still left no room. He started to argue. She didn't let him. "Now." He stepped back, smoldering. Jason watched the way his hands flexed, the way he looked at the phones as if they were witnesses cheating on him. "Sir," the lieutenant said to Jason, "we're screening for a hit-and-run suspect on a black bike. Yours is gray, different make, different plate. We're going to look at your registration, and if it's clean, you'll be on your way." "Sounds fair," Jason said and handed it over. She glanced at it, radioed a number, got the all clear. The efficiency of competence, the way it snaps a scene back into shape. Most of the crowd exhaled. The minivan kid grinned at nothing, as kids do when a monster under the bed has been named and found small. "Mr. Statham," the lieutenant said, returning the card, "sorry for the inconvenience." "You're doing your job," Jason said. "I respect that." The officer couldn't let it go. He was resisting. The lieutenant looked at him without blinking. "From where I'm standing, he was insisting you be professional." "You didn't see." "I saw enough," she said, and the officer shut his mouth with a click. Jason nodded to the lieutenant, then to the crowd, then reached for his helmet. He paused, turned back to the officer, and spoke in a tone so even it felt like a level-finding bubble center. "Some men need a badge to be big," he said. "Some men only need a spine." It wasn't a line, it was a diagnosis. The officer's jaw worked. You could see the choice forming, a swing, a snarl, a fall. Instead, he did the thing pride makes fools do. He laughed. It came out wrong, a cracked sound. "Get out of here," he said, as if he were granting mercy. Jason slipped the helmet on, pulled the strap, and swung back onto the bike. The engine caught with a purr that sounded like patience rewarded. He eased forward. The lieutenant lifted 2 fingers and the cones parted like understanding. Jason rolled past the line of cars, past the faces that had come for drama and gotten something richer, a masterclass in restraint under pressure. He could have left it there. Most men would. But a few yards past the cruisers, he braked, put his foot down, and turned his head just enough that his voice carried back without shouting. "Lieutenant," he called. She stepped forward. "Yes, sir." "Do yourself a favor. Get him some training or a desk." The lieutenant's eyes flicked to the officer, then back. "Noted." Jason nodded once, twisted the throttle, and the road unspooled beneath him like clean rope. Trees blurred. The air cooled. The anger that didn't take grew smaller in the mirror until it was only the size of a lesson. Behind him, the checkpoint shifted. Phones went down. People moved. The officer stared at the place Jason had been as if the ground had played a trick on him. The lieutenant said something quiet in his ear that made the color drain from his face. Clipboard found new love in paperwork. The traffic cop guided a grandmother through the cones with the gentleness of someone who just remembered why he'd put on the uniform in the first place. And yet stories don't end where engines do. The road has a way of looping back, making sure the unfinished finds finish. 10 miles on, Jason pulled into a turnout with a view, the kind that reminds you what sky is for. He killed the engine, listened to birds argue about branches, and let the breath he'd held for other people finally leave. He could have ridden on, and maybe he should have. But there was a reason the muscles in his shoulders had never learned laziness. People watch. People learn. Bad examples multiply if you don't answer them. So when a cruiser crested the hill and rolled into the turnout behind him, he wasn't surprised. He didn't brace. He just waited. The door opened, not the officer, the lieutenant. She approached without rank in her stride. "Mind if I say something?" she asked. "Go ahead." "That could have gone 5 different ways," she said. "You gave us the best one." Jason looked at the horizon. "Teach your man the other 4. "I will," she hesitated. "You could file a complaint." "I could," he said, "but that helps me. Doesn't necessarily help the people who don't have a name. Fix the system, not the headline." The lieutenant nodded slowly, like someone memorizing a poem. "We're working on it." "Good," Jason said, "because next time it's not me. Make sure the right person walks away." Wind combed the trees. A hawk wrote a lazy loop in the sky like a signature no one would forge. The lieutenant went back to the cruiser. Jason swung a leg over the bike and let the road call him home. Down at the checkpoint, the officer watched the horizon until the light made him squint. He saw himself reflected in the cruiser window and didn't like the angle. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel big. He felt heavy. The difference mattered. He took off his sunglasses and the world got sharper in ways that didn't flatter him. He pulled his gloves tighter and thought about the shove. How easy it had been, how stupid, how it had slid off that man like rain off stone and left him wetter than before. He thought about the phones, the lieutenant's voice, the minivan kid's eyes. Somewhere a small, stubborn thing in him cracked and a trickle of light got in. Jason didn't see that. He didn't need to. He'd done the part that was his. He'd given a choice, drawn a line, and refused to move it just because someone in a costume said please. He rode into the afternoon with the day peeling open ahead of him, the engine a steady heartbeat, the road a lesson he'd never stop learning. You don't have to swing to win. Sometimes the hardest punch is the one you don't throw. What no one at that checkpoint knew, not the laughing couple, not the kid with his face to the window, not even the officer staring at his own reflection, was that the day wasn't over. A call was coming. A second road. A situation that would test who they all were when there weren't any cameras. And that officer, he'd get one more chance to decide whether the badge was weight or worth. But that's for later. For now, there was only the echo of a quiet voice beside a hot engine, and the memory of a man who wouldn't kneel in the road for someone else's pride.